welcome everyone to our second Tuesday's Writing Discussion Group. These informal panel discussions with some of our favorite authors take place at 8 p.m. Eastern on the second Tuesday of each month. So this evening, our topic of discussion is transformation. And we have some of our author friends here on our panel, Elizabeth Jarrett Andrew, Nikki Hardy, and Jeff Monroe. So maybe what I'll do is ask each one of you to do a brief introduction. Maybe we can start with Elizabeth.
Sure. Oh, I should change my name. I'm not Emily. So I am Elizabeth Jarrett Andrew, and I have written a number of books. Mostly I write in the memoir personal essay arena, although I have written a novel called Hannah Delivered. And then I have two books out that might be of interest to this group. The first is called Writing the Sacred Journey, and it's about the art and practice of writing spiritual memoir. And then the second is called Living Revision, and it's about the revision process and how it really can be an invitation to spiritual growth. I think that the transformation on the page is very connected to the transformation that happens in the writer's heart, and that book kind of explores the interchange between developing a piece of writing and the changes that need to happen inside the writer. So in Minneapolis, we've weathered a rough couple weeks. There's a nice gentle rain happening out there now, and I feel like we're hopefully seeing some major good changes to our police force. And what else? I teach here, and I have a website called spiritualmemoir.com that's resources for writers of spiritual memoir. So I'm glad to be here.
So it's great to have you, Elizabeth. And one of the things I should have mentioned is that if you follow the Writing for Your Life blog, you will see many, many excerpts from the two books that Elizabeth mentioned. So, we really try to make her writing more aware to, all of you. And the second thing I should say is that Elizabeth, as well as Nikki and Jeff, who you'll hear from in a moment, all three are going to be involved in that online mega conference that I mentioned a moment ago. So maybe, Nikki, do you want to go next?
Sure. It's great to be here. I'm Nikki Hardy, and as you can probably tell from the accent, I'm from the deep south of England, but I now live in Charlotte, North Carolina. I came over here with my husband 14 years ago to plant a church from London to Charlotte, which seems crazy, but it was God's plan, not ours. And so we're here, and I write in the kind of intersection between God's abundant life and the storms of life, and how do we not separate them, but find them in the same space. So that's where I am. I'm all about kind of helping people discover that life doesn't have to be pain-free to be full, and then going and living it. And so yeah, we're here in Charlotte. We pastor a church. We've got 3 kids that have ranged from rising senior in high school to a senior in college who's just kind of graduated, kind of fizzled. But yeah, that's me.
Wonderful. Well, it's great to have you here, Nikki.
Thank you.
So next up is Jeff Monroe. Hi, Jeff.
Hey, Brian. Hi, everybody. I'm Jeff Monroe. I live in Holland, Michigan. I'm very jealous of Nikki's accent. I think it's very cool, and I wish I had some cool voice like that. That'd be really neat. I wrote the book Reading Buechner, which is a overview and introduction and overview to the work of another writer. So I wrote a book about a writer, Frederick Buechner, who I consider probably the greatest spiritual writer of our times. I also regularly blog, and I write a lot of poetry. And I just retired. Actually, it's official at the end of this month from a seminary where I've been working as executive vice president, was involved in a lot of different administrative things, but I also taught regularly and taught writing. And hopefully we'll be able to continue doing that from time to time in the future.
Well, we hope so, Jeff. We would all love to see that. So, well, thank you all for joining us this evening. And as is always the case, please feel free to unmute yourself and ask questions or, comment on any of the things that we're talking about. So feel free to do that. There's also a chat function if you'd rather, chat in a question, type in a question or what have you. That's all fine. So as I mentioned, this evening's topic is transformation. So, even in the middle of all the crazy crises that we've been going through, how might this be a time of transformation for us, either as individuals or as society? That's kind of what I was hoping that we would chat about today. So maybe we could go through the same sequence if you want. Elizabeth, maybe you could start by just sharing your reflections in general about that.
Oh, I'm muted. There we go.
No, you're not. You're muted.
Yeah, transformation is my passion because I definitely believe that there's a direct connection between personal transformation and social transformation, and I think that in a way that's our spiritual work to do, is to do the interior work of radical change that then brings about consequences in the exterior. So, it's interesting that you raised this question in this context, because my city is in the middle of a deep revision. and revision is messy and at times can feel destructive, but there's something really hopeful about having, I say this as, having been terrified in the last couple of weeks, and the fires in town have been, really very scary. The protesters were not scary. The fires were scary. And my post office is gone. Like a big part of my neighborhood is destroyed. So I don't say this lightly, but the possibilities that have opened up as a result of what's happened in the last couple of weeks, and the worldwide recognition of the dignity of George Floyd's life, and the outrageous violence perpetrated on him. It feels like a kind of ripping apart of the seams that needed to happen. And so now there's this potential to build something new. So I think it's a phenomenon that writers are really familiar with. You kind of take that draft and rip it apart at the seams, and it feels like a royal mess, and it's terrifying because you don't know if putting it back together is going to make it worse or better. But the fact is, there's not the potential for it to be better unless you go through that, unless you're really willing to give up what you had. So yeah, I think we're in that place as a town, and I'm really grateful to see the city council making some pretty radical steps toward dismantling our police system, and I just sincerely hope that Minneapolis can become a leader in transforming how we provide public safety. So yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Thanks, Elizabeth. You clearly, by being where you are at the forefront of certainly social change in this crazy era that we're living through. So please keep us updated on that, in the coming months. So Nikki, you want to share your thoughts about this too? Hello, Nikki.
Is that better?
There you go. Thank you.
There I go. And it was so eloquent what I said. Gosh, you missed it all. No, so I think for me, this has been an interesting time, both personally, as Elizabeth said, personal transformation leads to social transformation. And for me as a writer, I want to lead people on a journey of transformation, and any transformation I kind of feel like has, a story arc, has a character arc to it, and will only come out of a realization that transformation needs to happen, and that pain point. And I haven't really written much in the last couple of weeks in the racial justice space, other than to say that I'm at the very beginning. I felt at first like as a white middle-aged English woman, I wasn't able to speak into that, but I think with any story of transformation, like even in my book, there's a realization that I have something that I need to change, and I need to move forward, and that the first step is to always to notice, and I think a lot of people are waking up to that right now in that space, and I think it's about so when I write, I try and talk about, this is where we're at, and this is why it can stink, but this is where we want to get to. And I think I'm realizing that in my own journey as well, as Elizabeth said. So and leading my readers through that as well is an interesting process right now.
It's an interesting process for us all, I think, Nikki.
Yeah, and I think, for so long I was, feeling like I wanted to say something, didn't know whether I should say something, like so many people, how to enter into that space. And really, when I eventually emailed my readers, it was a kind of, I'm going to do what I always do when I don't know what to do or say, and just talked about what the process that I'm going through to move forward. So hopefully that was helpful. I got a lot of good response from that, so that was good.
Wonderful, wonderful. So Jeff, how about you?
Well, the first thing I would say, Brian, is I am aware that you and I, as near as I can tell, I can't see everybody on the call, but I think we're the two white middle age. Middle age is generous in both our cases. Neither Brian and I are going to live to be 120, so we're not actually middle age.
No, I don't qualify. That's for sure.
Yeah, Brian and I both come from places of enormous privilege, and so what I would say about transformation, there's a very simple kind of rubric that is not original with me, for sure. I'm not even sure where it comes from. But the idea that you have orientation, disorientation, and then reorientation, and that's a process that happens over and over again in our lives and collectively in societal lives. And so we are oriented in some way about something. Something happens that causes cognitive dissonance. It causes an unsettling in our lives. We're disoriented, and we've got to put it back together. And I think that's a personal journey. It's also a societal journey. I think, frankly, I agree with what Nikki just said, that you have to want it. You don't get transformation. You don't become sanctified. You don't move into a deeper holiness, a deeper humility without working on it and being aware of it. So now here's where I'm going to get in trouble, Brian, but shooting rubber bullets at people and throwing chemicals at them to get them out of your way so that you can stand and awkwardly hold a Bible that you never read doesn't produce transformation. What produces transformation is actually reading that Bible and actually trying to live by the words of it. And
what a concept.
Huh?
What a concept.
Yeah, I know. So I would say that it's a lifelong process. I think societally we are in a moment of disorientation, and it's a moment that has happened. It's not the first time in the history of our culture that it's happened. Maybe though there are enough voices and enough resources that some sort of lasting change could come, and the lasting change has got to come not just on a personal level, which I hope happens, but lasting change has to come on a policy level also. There have to be things have to happen. In Minneapolis, things are happening already with the police force. That has to happen around the country. If that doesn't happen, then we're in the same position. Last thing I want to say is I just think there are better resources now available. One of the things that my family is doing right now, and my wife and I have 2 grown children. They're both out of the house, but we committed together last Sunday that we're going to read Ibram X. Kendi's book, How to Be an Anti-Racist, as a family, and then talk about it together. Well, one of the things that dawns on me is that when I was the age of my kids, there weren't popular resources like that available to help people. So that at least is something that's a sign of progress. So I'll shut up now, but I could get going on that, Brian. So don't tempt me. I'm gonna stop.
Yeah, one thing I should point out, I've kind of begun collecting some recommended reading from some of our publishing industry partners, the publishing houses, about, the whole, racism issue. And so over the next few weeks, in each one of the weekly Writing for Your Life and Publishing Color and Compassionate Christianity email newsletters, I'll be highlighting the books from each one of those publishing houses. And so the book that you just mentioned is on that list, I know, and or one of those lists. And so just keep an eye out each week. Instead of a featured individual book like I usually do, I'm going to feature a set of books that have been suggested by those different publishing houses. So thanks for that reminder. And I think, to Elizabeth's point, the kind of social disorientation and reorientation that you were talking about, Jeff, has to ultimately come from the individuals reaching that conclusion. Because that's where the votes end up being, that's where the action ends up being, and that's where the tide, will eventually flow, one way or the other. And so hopefully at this moment in time, there's enough of a tide growing to, make some effective change, but only time will tell, right?
Can I add something here?
Sure.
No, I think with this particular group, this group has an advantage in that we all practice writing, and writing is itself a transformational practice. So if it's engaged with intention, so when we sit down to write, if we understand that the writing process is forming us as much as it is forming something on the page that will affect a reader, if we're open to that fact, if we're receptive to that, if we're receptive to the movements of the spirit or of inspiration, however you understand that, and if we're deliberately cultivating that openness as we're writing, that writing process is itself working change on us. It's opening our hearts. It's making us more aware, more whole. And so we have those tools already, that spiritual practice that we can sink into with greater intention and deliberation, that then facilitates or undergirds the other arenas of our life, like understanding our own racism, or understanding the connection between our smallness, our individual voices, and our capacity for affecting change in the world around us. Those sorts of applications or kind of translations of that internal transformation happen really naturally. But I just, I think that we have a lot of tools at our fingertips that just take an increased awareness of how they're functioning, how our writing process is functioning to change us. I hope I'm making sense there.
So Tabby Mann, Tabby mentioned something in the chat session. Would you like to talk about that more, Tabby, in terms of your novel and your question there? Tabby, can
Yes. Yeah. Sorry, I'm cooking as I listen. Yeah, I mean, this is an interesting conversation, and I struggle because I've completed a novel, and frankly, I struggle with the idea of transformation, exactly what that means, what that looks like on the page, especially from the perspective of a Christian writer. My first novel is from the perspective of a woman who is trapped in her body. She's had a stroke, and she's watching as the country devolves into fascism. And there isn't a whole lot of what would be considered transformation in the Christian literature context. She is a Christian, and she's watching and trying to figure out, okay, well, what does all of this mean as I see the world around me shifting into something that is perhaps what the Lord has talked about in Scripture, but I never really actually expected. Like, I talked a good game around experiencing it, but the actual experience of the devolution of society and the exclusion of God and what that means from the church perspective, when the church shuts its doors to God and cleaves more to nationalism than to the Christ that they proclaim. And so it's not like typical transformation. And I've struggled in terms of, like, how do I present that when I shop it to potential publishers or agents? Like, is this transformation, or how do we define transformation if it is transformative in terms of accepting the reality of the devastation that God talks about in his word at the end of time, or the lead up to end of times, as opposed to the transformation that we're all very comfortable with in terms of the sinner coming to Christ. This is someone who is already in Christ, but is now recognizing that the truth of Scripture is true and terrifying, and crap, what do I do with that? And so like the real question, and so I don't know exactly what my question is, other than like, I guess the discussion of the transformation of what transformation may be in 2020, where we, thank you for mentioning it, whoever it did, where we see a leader upheld by people who say, oh, but he held a Bible, but he held it upside down, and he has no idea what it means. And so what does transformation mean in this day and age, and what does it mean to live out the words of Micah? So I don't know what that means. I mean, I'll drop it. I'm a therapist, so I'll drop it there to see what lands for you, what rises to the top, all of the language that I'm comfortable with in my day-to-day existence of, okay, and so what did you hear me say? And then I'll go back to the stove because something may be burning.
Anybody like to comment on that?
I've got a question for you, Tabby. I'm wondering
Put
whether
it in writing so that she can hear it when she comes back from the stove, maybe.
can you? Oh, she can hear.
Okay, good.
Okay, great. Tabby, are you asking whether there needs to be a transformation of some sort in your novel?
Yeah, or what does transformation mean to us now? I mean, I think that transformation, for me, as a reader of Christian fiction, has transformed. When I first came to Christian fiction, and I love Francine Rivers, and I love like there's a definite transformation of, oh, I didn't know the Lord, and my heart has been transformed, and now I can. And so there's like this pretty transformation that I think I'll say that I understood as transformation, but me in my everyday life, living in a pretty Christian bubble in Northern Virginia, it's sort of been blown to smithereens because those who have been transformed in speech, now there's a real difference in terms of what transformation means. And so I'm struggling with that personally, but also in the text.
Mm.
Well, I mean, Tabby, one suggestion, I mean, for you to talk with some of the publishing industry people, if you can, editors or agents, and get their feedback on how to position, your work.
What I hear, Tabby, is, there's a real strong conversion narrative out and about in the world, and with a really solid lineage in Christianity, which shapes stories into before and then this conversion moment and after. And I think so much fiction, so much Christian fiction, so much spiritual memoir uses that narrative. And what I hear you saying is that narrative isn't working for my character. My character's transformation is really quite different. And I think that's exciting, honestly, because the conversion narrative is worn and perhaps not appropriate anymore for our current situation. So what I would suggest is that, maybe it would be helpful to clarify before you approach any sort of publishing industry people, like what is the transformation that your character goes through? I might do like a before portrait and an after portrait and say, okay, well, what changed for her? Because I think about, like, I don't know if you know Elie Wiesel's memoir, Night.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of transformation in that, and it's all toward despair and unbelief, right?
Yeah.
So transformation goes in all directions, so to really be able to articulate what is the transformation that happens for your character,
Yeah.
And what is your message or your exploration using that story, and then just to claim that, because I think there's a real place for alternatives to that traditional conversion narrative.
That's really great. Thank you.
And I'm wondering, Tabby, whether as to Elizabeth's point, so often the Christian fiction transformation is one from, sinner to saved, from lost to found. And as she said, I think it's quite exciting that you're going from found but sounds like to me from what you've said that this woman has her faith kind of neatly aligned, and so is it more kind of boxed to unboxed? Is it, sure to doubting, and actually she's freer in her doubts and questioning, allowing herself to come to God with all the doubts and questions because she's discovered that God can handle it all. I don't know. I don't want to put
Yeah.
but it's almost like I don't want to say a backwards conversion, but we go from, sinner to saved, and then often we get boxed because we think we know God and how he's going to act and what Christians should do. And then maybe your transformation is a sequel to that.
Mm-hmm. I love that because it makes me think of all of the memes and the truth of the church is unbound now in COVID. Church has been set free because it no longer can be bound by the walls of the church. It has to be much bigger and outside of those walls. So it's sort of like faith unbound. I love that idea.
And the juxtaposition about her being physically bound in a body that cannot move. I mean, there's a lot there.
Yeah.
So it's almost like her faith became unbound as during her being bound.
Yeah. No, that's beautiful. Yeah.
I have a question, Tabby.
Yeah.
Does she, can she talk or do anything with her condition?
She has had a deep brainstem stroke, and so she can she can flutter her eyes, she can blink her eyes, and that's the mode of conversation. But that happens like midway through the whole novel. You see her as whole, quote unquote, and then you see her as the country devolves. Her physical condition also follows that path of devolution, and she's able to interact with the world via blinking, basically.
Oh, okay, so no motor skills. But is there anyone else, any other character in her life that would like be like antagonistic to her beliefs, and that she could somehow relate to and, convince that Jesus is real through all of this darkness that's going on with the fascism, that could, kind of give her a spiritual heroism? Or
No, and I think, Paula, you've hit on the question, because the antagonist is actually society. And so, she's well cared for. I mean, she's loved, she's protected. There's some ups and downs there, but no, it is very much observational, and it is her diaries when she's whole, and then her diaries in terms of just her thoughts when she's not whole, and a lot of being acted on and watching as things evolve, and how do you interact with that? So there isn't conversion, but there is interaction with other Christians in different way, at different levels. And so she has for example, a former Bible study leader, co-leader with her, who has sort of bought into the ideals of the dear leader and bought into them based on her Christian belief. But then there are others who are also Christians who are like firmly opposed, like a mandala, against the dear leader. And so there's that juxtaposition, but she's really unable to make a difference. It is an observational piece of, okay, you say that you believe that the dear leader is our great Cyrus. He is Cyrus, and America is Israel. And that's a lie straight from the pit of hell. But right, like so it's much more observational.
So I'd be interested in hearing, what some of the other folks are writing about, in terms of transformation. Anyone want to share that?
Hey,
Well,
Brian, I was just gonna say one more thing to Tabby before we finished on
Sure.
that, if that's okay. I just wanted to say I think it's an intriguing premise. I think you got to get clear on the point, as others have mentioned, but also I don't know that the Christian publishing industry is the place. So I would say work with an agent,
Yeah.
and be very open to others. There's a lot wider experience. Christian publishing industry has tended towards feel-good books, and you don't necessarily have to do that. And Cormac McCarthy has made an awful good living writing pretty bleak novels. I'm not saying your novel is like that, but not every story has to have a happy ending. If you get out of that world into a bigger world, you might find more openness to it.
Thanks, Jeff. I agree with you. It makes me sad, but I agree with you.
I do too. That makes a lot of sense. So anyway, who else? Anybody else would like to talk about what they're writing about these days that are, related to our transformation topic?
hey, this is Audrina. I came in late, which I'm sorry about that, but actually I just received my book today. It came in. But I'm not really sure if it fits in. My book is about a young man who is schizophrenic, and part of his issue is his fight with God. He grew up in a Christian home but decided to leave that, and because of different things he decided that he and God were not friends, and so his entire adult life was geared around that. And with the schizophrenia, I'm a psychologist, retired now, but so with the schizophrenia, he became very, what's the word? He just really assumed that everybody was against him, his family, everybody. And so all of that, along with a trauma that happened to him as a child, caused his hate for God to increase and his schizophrenia to get worse, because his schizophrenia included voices. So the book goes through talking about that. He's talking with a psychologist to try to figure out what's going on, and and all the things he has to go through to come to grips with his idea of his relationship with God, so that he can deal with the schizophrenia, so he can deal with the voices and his family. So it's published. I didn't publish it through a Christian, well, I published it with a Christian publisher, but not through a Christian industry. But it's book 2. The first book is about this person's family. So it's done fairly well. You know, it's not a New York bestseller or anything, but it's done well in my world. So I know this one's going to do well, because a lot of people have been begging me to finish it so they can see what happens to Wade. It's called The Story of Wade. And my books are written in that emotional, relational, spiritual, family genre, because I like working with families and dysfunction and helping them to pull them. And every single family in the world has dysfunction in it, you know. And if a family says we're not dysfunctional, they are, and they are. So I like to work with that when I was practicing, and now I like to write about it. You know, what the dysfunctions are and how they work, how the families work through it, how the individual works through it to help pull the family together. And I just pulled him out because he had the biggest issue. So this second book is strictly about him.
Hold it up so we can see it.
Oh,
Yeah.
can you see it?
It's a beautiful cover.
Thank you. So
Yeah,
this is the back. I
gorgeous.
like colors, but it's called The Story of Wade, and it's book 2. I have a series. It's called Saved by Grace, and so this is book 2 to Saved by Grace. And like I said, the first book was about his family, and you know, the Bible talks about the sins of the father, and we tend to carry that even though we don't have to. And the first book is about things that happen with the father that trickle down throughout the family. And this, like I said, is just Mr. Wade and how he managed through his issues.
Well, congratulations on that, Audrey.
Yeah.
Who is the publisher?
Kelly Cruz. She helps people that are online, that are doing self-publishing. And so she did all the hard work, the ISBN and all of that stuff, and getting it into the printer and stuff for me.
Wonderful.
And so, and I really like her. She's published all of, well, I have 4 books. She's published all 4 of them. So I really like her.
Very cool.
So it's on Amazon now, and it's on Barnes and Noble. So I'm really happy about that too.
Yeah. Congratulations. It's exciting.
Thank you.
You just got it today. Just got it.
Well, what I did was I paid full price for 2 from Amazon. And so they came today. The case will be a while because with everything that's going on, it's coming in slower. So I probably won't get the case until next week. I ordered 50. And Ingram's, that's who I'm printing through. And you can just, you know, order however many you want. You don't have to have a garage full of books, which I like. And I can just order as many as I need at a time. So when it gets to where we can kind of mingle better, I want to have a book signing.
So do you mind if I ask what the price per book is that Ingram is charging you for those?
Well, this book is 15, but I take that back. It's $5.25 or something like that.
So as the author, that's what you pay?
As the author, that's what I pay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. And is it like, how many pages roughly?
385, I think.
Okay, that's pretty long.
Yeah, so 345. And this is thicker than my other book, the first book to this. And the first book we went through Amazon when it was Create Space.
Right.
Yeah. So it was like almost $4. But Ingram's it was $5.
Cool.
Mm-hmm.
So Tabby is asking a question about whether or not there was any upfront cost for printing.
No. I paid my publisher, and she handled everything else.
Okay, so it's kind of a hybrid publishing model.
Right. She just put it. She did the PDF and sent to them, and so I didn't have to pay. I think it was. Well, I take that back. I think it was $45, and that was included in the fee that I paid Kelly.
Yeah.
Which wasn't expensive at all, which is one of the reasons why I love her. So, because she's not expensive, but that $45 was included in what I paid her.
Yeah, some of these hybrid publishers, I've heard like figures like $10,000, that they charge up front, and then, the cost per book oftentimes is not very attractive.
Mm-mm. Well, this was $5 and some change because, and all I did was, and I'm still new at this, but, I just figured in the cost that I paid Kelly and, and to come up with what price I wanted to have the book. And this basically is the same price as the first book was $15 as well.
So Denise is asking the question, what does hybrid publishing mean? So since
Yeah.
I threw out that term, I guess I should explain it.
Yeah.
There's kind of three basic avenues, three different types of publishing. One is called traditional publishing, and that's where the publishing house will pay the author in advance on royalties. So basically the publishing house agrees to publish your book. They work out a book deal, with you that gives you an advance on royalties. They give you a certain percentage of royalties on every book that's sold. And then the traditional publisher takes care of the editing and formatting and book cover design and things like that. The third model, before I get to hybrid, because it's kind of in the middle, the third model is what I call do-it-yourself publishing, also known as self-publishing. But some of the hybrid publishing companies have kind of usurped that term of self-publishing. So that's why I kind of call it do-it-yourself publishing or indie publishing, independent publishing. But in any event, that model, the independent publishing model, is one where, basically you as an individual take your book files and upload them yourself to Amazon or Ingram or wherever. And you may have hired someone to do editing for you, or you may have hired someone to do your book cover design or what have you. But at the end of the day, you're the individual that's driving that truck, and you get all the royalties that come directly from the sales of the book. Hybrid, as the name might sound, is kind of in between. And, counter to the traditional publishing model, instead of being paid up front to write a book, you're paying the publishing house to publish your book. Which, in the do-it-yourself model, you still are probably going to be paying someone, a freelance editor or freelance cover design person, but it's a little bit more under your control, but it's a little bit riskier too, because you kind of have to know what you're doing. So anyway, that's kind of just a quick, my version of the answer to that question, Denise.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you.
So who else is writing about transformation these days?
Suzanne, are you going to go?
Oh, well, so me, Suzanne? This
Yes.
one here? Oh, well, for me, I haven't been writing lately, but I've been experiencing, so I do sculpting too, and I'd like to start writing. For me personally, I feel like I'm on furlough right now because I work with seniors. My background is in social work, and for me, it's been a time of transformation, really, getting out of being so busy and being more relaxed, having time for meditation, prayer in the morning, taking more time walking daily in nature. So I'm sure I'm eventually going to get to the place where I'm creating more too. I'd like to start a autobiography related to my life and my sculpting I do too. So, but right now I've never had an opportunity like this to actually have time, which is really a gift. And being paid, right now as we are with the $600 a week, on unemployment insurance. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. Yeah.
So thanks, Suzanne.
Yeah,
So,
thanks for asking.
Paula, did you want to share something?
Well, I'm writing a book. I'm not sure if it fits transformation, but it's based on the parable of the sower and the seed, where there are four sisters who are whose lives are depicted based on the soil that they fell on, and so there's some raciness to it. But the one lady who from good soil, she's a teacher, and her church, can you hear me? Her church has this thing called Bible Buddies, and so she brings kids to church, and they come from a home environment where, Jesus wasn't taught or anything, and she, God uses her to convert them to the, Christianity, and that, to understand that Jesus loves them. And then it ends with Judgment Day, so then she sees them in heaven. Can you hear me?
Yeah, no, we could hear you. At the beginning it was breaking up a little bit, but then the sound quality got better, so we could hear you.
Yes, my computer said that the internet was unstable, so I don't know what part you missed, but I've been doing a bunch of writing, and actually one of my books is getting published with a hybrid publisher. But then this one is my novel, and it's based on the parable of the sower and the seed. So Zoe, the main character, tries to convince her sisters, talk them into believing in Jesus because they fell on different paths. But she does convert some children that she brings to church regularly. With Jesus' help, of course, she converts them. So I don't know if that would fit the transformation piece with the kids that she brings to Jesus, gets to know, and then she sees them in heaven at the end of the book, because it's about Judgment Day. It ends with, it's called The Family Reunion.
Well, as I think several people have mentioned, there's a lot of different forms of transformation. So, it sounds like you've captured one too.
Okay.
So any other, before we close off tonight, any other thoughts or questions that people would like to share?
Brian, I had another thought just as we were talking about the topic of transformation, and that is how important mentors and coaches are also, or therapists, but having people that we walk with in our life that are and not just friends, but people that have permission to ask us difficult questions and to hold a mirror up to us so that we can see ourselves at times, I think is also, should have spoken to that earlier, but that's another, to me, that's been a really, really significant part of transformation throughout my life.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, I know personally, as a single person entrepreneur now, you know, not in a company or a startup or anything, I found it incredibly important to have, you know, a few folks that will, you know, be great to bounce ideas off of, you know, and kind of, you know, help you formulate or refine things. Just personally speaking, I've found that to be incredibly helpful.
I'm just thinking about some of the different stories that we've heard tonight and how I think what makes a good book, no matter what its genre is that the character moves somehow. And I don't mean an external movement, but I mean some sort of internal movement, you know, a shift in heart or a shift in being. And I think that's just kind of the key ingredient to story is transformation or movement. So, you know, it's exciting to see how many different forms that takes. And I think it's always like a really interesting question to say, you know, what's moving in my story, and, you know, how does my main character change on the inside from beginning to end? And what are the external factors that bring that about? What are the internal factors that bring that about? It's just, you know, it's an exciting endeavor, I think.
Okay, so any final thoughts or questions before we sign off? Thank you all for joining us. I really appreciate it. It's always great to hear from everyone and, you know, hear what you're up to. And let's see, just to give you a little bit of a preview, we have the Writing for Your Life online conference coming up starting June 22nd. So take a look at that if you're interested. And the business of being a spiritual writer, the next version of that will be in July. I mentioned that we recently started a Writing for Your Life podcast. So any of you who like enjoying podcasts, you can find that on Apple or Stitcher or, you know, any of the podcast platforms. And then finally, there's a new initiative that I'm working on that's called Author Connect. And this is still work in progress, but I'm hoping to come out with something that will be something like a online social network just for spiritual writers. So it'll be an opportunity for you to have a profile, to share private messages with other members of the service, to have your own wall where you post things. And it'll be also open to industry people, so they can come and search through the profiles and see if there's someone that they want to contact too. So it's another experiment that's coming. So stay tuned for that later on.
I have a question. Are we still going to have the meeting, the conference in Milwaukee in October?
I am in the process right now I haven't announced this yet, but I'm in the process right now of converting that to be an online conference instead of an in-person conference.
Oh.
So everyone who's registered for the Milwaukee conference will automatically be converted to the online conference unless they want a refund. But I think it's going to be a long time before we're able to do in-person conferences. At least a long time before.
I bought the VIP.
I'm sorry?
I bought the VIP package.
Yeah, so I mean, you'll get access to the entire conference as well as some one-on-one meetings with some of the industry people.
Okay.
Yeah.
And is the Charlotte conference, actually 2 weeks, I wasn't entirely clear. It looked like both the first week and the second week were different content.
They are different content, but it's all part of the same conference.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
you just register once and you get access to the whole thing.
yeah. Okay.
But yeah, it's completely new content each week. There's no repeats. That's why it takes 10 days because I'm trying not to schedule anything that overlaps.
It's actually going to take about a month before I can watch it all.
Well, all will be available for 3 months.
Yeah.
After the conference. So yeah, I can totally see that. I mean, try to do that all within the 10 days would be too much. So that's why I said, okay, let me just, make it available to everybody that registers for the following 3 months.
No, that's great.
So, so Paula, back to your question, probably by the middle of July, something like that, I'll be in a position to be able to announce the Publishing in Color online. It'll probably be the first week in October. All right, well, thanks everyone. Really great seeing you all. Thanks again for your participation and have a wonderful rest of the week.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
Certainly. Bye for now.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Many blessings to everyone.
Yeah.